Fun fact as well, I also played a fireman as a TV extra in The Crown when they depicted the Aberfan tragedy as well.
So, yeah, I forgot you did that, yeah.
Just throw that in there as well. Amazing about dreams. Reminds me of a little bit of the movie Minority Report as well, when she's having precognitions about the future through dreams. And I think that's a whole podcast in itself, talking about premonitions and precognitions and so on. The question that I have for you, Viv, is so in regards to free will, are our actions unconstrained, or are we compelled and constrained by this physical universe? Are we compelled to do things within the apparatus of our human bodies? So can you talk a little about that, if that's okay?
Well, again, I'm drawing on what Abdu'l-Baha says about free will, and he says this is a very abstruse question to answer. So it's going to be difficult to get a handle on, very difficult in sound bites to do it, but I'll try my best to look at two things about free will, or lack of it, so to speak. There's a hard concept of a hard predeterminism. In other words, that all our actions are determined by events that have occurred outside our control. For instance, let's have a look at a few of those. It's predetermined. We didn't have a say in it. We didn't determine these things. We didn't determine when we would be born. We didn't determine what family we're born into, what color hair we have, what color eyes we have. We didn't determine what country we're born into, whether it's peaceful or hostile, and so on. So there are many things that are predetermined for us. And you could say that's the hard determinism. On the other hand, Abdu'l-Baha says, and he gives various instances of things outside our control. For instance, that we're going to die, that we can experience misfortune in life, and so many other things he mentions that are outside our control. But on the other hand, he says that what is controllable by us, and even in the most terrible situations, is how we respond to events around us, whether we're morally accountable for them. So, for instance, whether I can smile instead of frown, that's my choice all the time, wherever I am, whether in the most terrible places, I can choose to smile or frown. I can choose to help somebody in some way or another, or choose to, be harmful to them. I can choose, with regards to moral questions, my path all the time, whether to be kind or unkind, whether to be forgiving or unforgiving. So that's within, that's not determined. That is what we have free will about. Decisions that we make related to moral values and the ethics that come from these decisions. So we say, definitely, we have free will. Otherwise, if we didn't have free will with regards to how to behave, how to be positive, and so on, why have so much attention given to an educational nurturing process which is focused on enabling people to become good citizens because they understand that they're morally accountable and just can't put it all down to predetermined actions and blame something of the past out of our control.
This predeterminism you're talking about, it kind of reminds me a little of, and this is something that we will talk about more in the next topic as well. It reminds me of when Stephen Fry was asked about, do you believe in God? And he gave the remark that you got this worm in your eye and its existence is about burrowing itself out from somebody's eye and so on. He's like, if there's a God, why does these things allow to happen? And I'm sure this will be talked about in terms of like, if there's such bad stuff, why does God let that happen? Before we come on to that, this predeterminism, can you talk more about that? And are some things out of our control in our lives, or do you think there is room for change?
Of course there's room for change, yeah. And there's room for evolution as well. Because with the process that we are experiencing inside ourselves as a humanity, we're experiencing ever more change. So change, if everything is predetermined, it would basically stay the same. But because we are experiencing an evolutionary process from our mother's womb in that world to this world and so on, and everything that's evolving cognitively and biologically for humanity over the ages, then there's no doubt about it that we need free will to be able to adapt to that change. But animals don't go through that process. They have their instincts and so on. The changes that do occur are biological changes to do with environment and something to do with perhaps becoming more efficient and catching food and doing all the sort of animal functions. But for the most part, they're not subject to change as we are. So we are subject to masses of change over an evolutionary process, and will continue progressing cognitively, biologically, spiritually, morally, intellectually. Animals, God bless them, they have no experience of that.
So it's about, with animals, it's more about adapting to certain environments.
Good word. Yeah, I should have thought of that. That's a very good word, adapting to environment, yeah.
Yeah, more about adapting, whereas human beings can adapt to different environments, but also have the power to change the environment on a gigantic scale compared to the animals. Even animals, when they have to adapt to their natural to their environment, will do things that as human beings we would see morally reprehensible, like even kill their young, for example, to adapt, or even eat their own children to adapt to that particular climate. And somebody could make the argument as well, human beings would have to do such things as well if put under horrible, torturous circumstances, and I'm sure that is the case. But what do you think creates this change? What power do you think we have as human beings that the animals, we have spoken about this before, the animals don't have? Viv, you spoke about postmodernism. I did an art degree, and I wrote a thesis about postmodernism, liberalism, and art. I love art, I love culture, and everything that inhabits it. Can you talk more about this postmodernist way of thinking, this very liberal stance we have on art and fashion, music, and things like this? I'm heavily influenced by lots of different types of cultures. Do you think through materialism, because society has strayed away so far from this moral compass in which you speak about, do you think this has infested itself? Materialism has infested itself within these cultures. Can you talk more a little bit about that? I know it's kind of going off the topic a little bit, but it's still in the context of free will, because man gets to choose, as you said, which avenue it wants to go down in. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's going to be difficult in a few minutes to bring this to the surface, so it's understandable, but I'll have a go anyhow.
Just want to say as well, after you answer that question, we'll move on to that next primary topic, which is, does God allow evil? Which I think all of this segues in one sense into that topic.
So let's have a look at this process that humanity is going through, an evolutionary process all the time, change all the time, which you introduced earlier. It's a necessary condition of this world and of time and place, Abdu'l-Baha. Necessary. Change is necessary. But we get stuck. And how do we get stuck? In a religious sense, we get stuck with a particular messenger of God, and therefore fail to recognize the next messenger of God that they promised would come after them. And as a consequence of this, we find people who are stuck in processes which have now become out of date when they're following particular messengers of God, whether it's Buddha, Moses, Christ, Muhammad. It's not to say that they're wrong. The messengers are far from it. They gave teachings which were necessary. And as I emphasized earlier, their moral teachings stay the same all the time. It's the oneness of religion that they're bringing. However, what humanity or sections of humanity, and the whole of humanity now, has gone through is that when a new messenger of God comes along, that's the next stage of development, just like children going moving up a class in school and getting taught by different teachers. It's the next stage of development. But if we use our free will to ignore the next messenger, not even look into and investigate whether they're a great educator from God, and we just, because we have interpretations from one's own particular religion, which do not cohere with the reality of a messenger of God coming, as a consequence of this, then we find division between all the religions. And that is something which is happening now. So we say that Baha'u'llah has come, is the latest messenger of God for today. Another one will come in the future. Many have come in the past. But what we're experiencing, because Baha'u'llah, when he came at the middle to the end of the 19th century, born in Persia, persecuted, imprisoned, terrible sufferings he went through over a 40-year period, giving his teachings all the time, which amount to about 100 volumes all in all. But because humanity hasn't taken to these understandings, then we're experiencing the disintegration or the inability of the inherited thoughts and superstitions and wrong interpretations of the past of being broken down by the scientific advances that humanity has gone through. And because of this, can I just say, it has to break down, because we have a choice. We either accept the new messenger of God when he comes and his teachings. Baha'u'llah said, this is the day for humanity to come together, the consciousness of the oneness of mankind, and to get rid of all our prejudices. And because we haven't accepted this as the most vital part of social teachings from a messenger of God, we're experiencing the disintegration, we're experiencing disunity before we can really want and desire in our heart unity. So everything is disintegrating around us. So the moral compass, which I emphasized earlier, where virtually people are making up their own moral compass now, day by day, and it changes all the time. This is part of the disintegratory process, which is necessary to disconnect us from those things that have happened in the past, from followers of past messengers of God who are stuck with their superstitious, wrong interpretations of reality, which does not go alongside and be in harmony with science. And as a consequence, people are saying, well, we don't want this anymore. Many things that science has come along to prove that religious teachings, for the most part, when they conflict with science, they're metaphors, they're allegories. But people, the followers, take them as absolute fact. And that the earth started 6,000 years ago, and by Adam and Eve, stuck on the planet by God, and everybody was born from Adam and Eve. This is an allegory for a creative process, not a physical fact. And as a consequence of this, everything has to break down to allow people to think for themselves, not be constrained by the doctrines and the teachings and the power people of the past, to be able to think our own thoughts, to independently investigate truth. And although it's taken a long time and there's much more disunity and disruption involved in this process, it is a process that's necessary to enable humanity to use its free will correctly. And by correctly, I mean by turning to the next messenger of God, investigating his reality, investigating his teachings, and then when it goes into the heart, to put into effect his teachings, which are necessary for today, which is to bring all humanity together.